you in the middle, honey. You're pretty.
No, I want to be further away from the camera.
I don't think you're. I think you're actually closer if you look at it.
Well, I'll prop it all out and it'll be good.
Wow, this is cool.
Had to learn how to do all this, so.
Got this little mic here, man.
Yeah, hopefully
Yeah,
that's
put your
better.
leg down.
Oh, it'll be
Is his
fine.
leg in the way?
Nah, it'll be fine. No.
It's more comfortable. I sit weird. I'm really talking weird.
Yeah, however you're comfortable is good.
Okay, I'm taking off the pants. No, I'm joking. Wait a second. It's not that kind of show.
Make sure we're recording.
So, I mean, we gotta have some, and I guess he said Kim graduated from Bowie in '93. So that would have been, is that when Brad Morgan graduated?
I think so. I think she
And then that would have
graduated.
been Tim Walker. Yeah, okay. So, I mean, there's no doubt we're connected somewhere, being a small town like this.
Mhm.
So I'm like, oh yeah.
Right, y'all ready?
Yeah.
Okay, then you don't have to look at the camera. We'll just talk, have a conversation, the camera, click everything, okay? I'll look at the camera when we start, but that'll be it. Okay, you ready?
I guess so.
Okay. Welcome back to the Mind Body Project. Thanks for taking a little time to join me today. Please welcome my guest today on the series World Impactors. They were an all-American family. He was crushing it in the business world. She was crushing it as a stay-at-home mom of two. In 2005, God prepared them to show them a hole in their hearts for a special little girl from Vietnam who would find her forever home and family with them. During the adoption process, God opened their eyes to the poverty and despair of Vietnam, along with the heavy burden of forgotten children of Vietnam. Please welcome my guests today, the founders of Tiny Hearts of Hope in Vietnam, Brent and Stacy Tarr. Thank you very much for joining me today.
Thank you for having us.
Home for a little while, for a few years. About to go back to Vietnam, so we wanted to catch this before you went back to Vietnam for a month. So we're going to get to the orphanage and Tiny Hearts of Hope, but we want to kind of go back a little bit, kind of get to know the two of you before we follow the journey to where you're currently at. So, kind of get to know, did you date in high school? Did you have some great, how did you meet story?
Of course. Being away from Texas for so long, we always used to joke that she was my favorite cousin. We actually
Don't
worked
say
it.
that around here.
I know, right? We might start checking the lines and see that our tree does cross. We worked in the business world as well, and we would always tease about that. Up in Portland, Oregon, we were working, and I would go to kiss her, and I'd see people go, I thought they said they were brother and sister. But I guess we would have met, it would have been 1991, 1,000 years ago. And I was born and raised in Wichita Falls until I was 12, and then came here from 12 on. She was born in Henrietta, but we crossed paths because I ended up going to Goldberg and finishing up and graduating there. And I guess Goldberg was playing Petrolia, where she was going to school, and I had broken my foot, so I wasn't able to play, but I went to the game and I was on crutches.
He was flirting with all the girls.
While you're on.
On
What
crutches.
is- Of course, she played it up, don't she? And I guess we had mutual friends, and that kind of brought us together.
Yeah.
And, 91 until, I guess we got married in 95.
We were 15 and 17.
15 and 17, high school sweethearts.
Don't tell our kids that.
We've had that conversation, haven't we?
Isn't that hard to believe that, when we think of our kids at that age, you think, they could get a
We were way more
boyfriend.
mature, right?
Yes, I
Okay.
think that. Yes, they could get a boyfriend or girlfriend. That could be their spouse for life.
Yeah.
That's true.
Not crazy.
And so after high school, did you head to college separate ways?
We
go to
did.
college
I mean,
together?
we got married. She was 18, nearly 19, and I was 21. I had been going to school. We both went to NCTC.
Mhm.
Got married and went to college together.
Actually worked right over here at the Walmart through college. Both graduated from NCTC. Goodness, we both had jobs out of high school. I'm sorry, out of high school, of course, with Walmart, but out of college, I got a job offer up in Washington State working for Boeing. And then, of course, she had her hairstylist.
See, we both worked for Boeing. I worked in Boeing.
Well, and it's funny, my mom said she
And-
worked with you.
yeah.
And so I thought, so I was going to ask you about that.
Mm-hmm.
So, yeah, we moved to Seattle, and she was managing Supercuts, and I was working at Boeing up there. I mean, God has always seemed to bless us financially in the business world. God gave us business opportunities education opportunities.
So did you both grow up in church?
Neither one of us did.
No,
So
not at all.
Really?
I lived across the street in Henrietta from a church, so my parents sometimes would say, hey, on Sunday morning, you need to go to church. So I just went alone, and that's where I got saved, is at a church just close to my house, at a church camp. And then Brent kind of probably did the same.
Well, yeah, I mean, here everybody believes in Jesus, and I
Mhm.
think it's. I don't. My mom wouldn't go regularly, but we went a few times, and Liberty Baptist in Wichita Falls. I accepted the Lord because I was scared of hell, and I got a free pencil that said Jesus loves you. So it never really was real.
Mhm.
But both of us coming from broken families, I think we ran to Jesus and ran into each other, kind of thing.
Mhm.
And so when we got together, it was like, we're going to make this an important part of who we are.
Mhm.
And I guess it flourished in Washington State because what we found going to Washington was we didn't have family. Being here where we were close to family, close to friends, never have left this area, to Washington State, which is basically another culture, another language, because we had trouble communicating. Y'all fix them too? I don't understand. So what we did is we found family in church. We said we need to find a church. And really, for the first time, we started going to church regularly when, up in Washington State, and we started seeing godly people and said, you know what, this is where we need to be. And we started seeing kids respecting their parents. We started seeing just a whole different culture that we had never been raised around. And it made us grow in our faith. It made us grow in our marriage because we couldn't run to mom and dad if we had a fight. We couldn't go get money and all these things that you would get with the family structure. We really had to rely on each other, and we had to rely on God, and it brought us closer.
And you moved there started having kids in Washington State with kiddos, or?
Yes, we were.
We moved there straight out of college, and we were there for a short time, and we knew we wanted to come back home. We just
Mhm.
felt like, okay, we want to have kids and come back home, and God just had different plans. So we did get pregnant in Washington State, and from there, we made several moves along the way to get us to Vietnam, but it was never to Texas. It was never where we wanted
Which
to
we
be.
always wanted. We always wanted to be like, we'll go. I remember telling my mom, I got a job in Boeing. It's in Seattle. We'll just be there for 1 year. 1996 is when we moved. And then 96 until we didn't really come back officially until 2020 with COVID. Sent us back home. But it's neat how God orchestrates things in your past, because we realized had we not moved to Washington and all these other places, we would have had a difficult time going to Vietnam. So in other words, when you go to Washington, you might as well be on the other side of the world, because it's not something you can drive home to. I mean, it was 2,000 miles. And so we kind of broke that family tie, which kind of directed us to be able to do like a Vietnam thing.
Mhm.
So it would have been extremely hard had we been living here around family, and then, okay, we're going to Vietnam. We felt that homesickness early on in 96, 10 years prior to moving to Vietnam. So we'd already kind of cut that umbilical cord, so
Mhm.
to speak.
And then what year did you start having kiddos? They were born in?
99 was our first, so I guess, what year did we move off?
96.
We moved in 96, had our oldest Addie in 99, and then 2 years later,
2000.
4 years later, and so now we're up to 5 kids.
Up to 5 kids. So you have two. And after Washington, you move? Where'd you move from Washington?
So we went to Portland, Oregon, same state.
Mhm.
And so we were working in Portland and driving.
Different state, same area.
Yeah, different state, same state, different area.
Yeah.
So yeah, I knew what you meant. So we went from Seattle and about 3 hours south to Portland. We
Mhm.
worked, but we were still living in Washington State. And then, so essentially what we were doing is I went from engineering to contract engineering. So we basically said, we can make more money, and basically we can kind of see stuff. We didn't have kids at that time, so we were just kind of having fun. And it was like, hey, why don't we go to Portland? Why don't we go to, and then we moved to North Carolina, and then we moved to St. Louis, Missouri.
And when you move those places, you find yourself finding a church when you get to those places?
Every time.
That was our first thing that we wanted to do, because that was our family.
Mhm.
We were trying to find our people.
Mhm.
So I think, and ultimately, I think our spiritual journey was making us stronger each move, because it takes a lot of faith to just move to a new area where you don't have friends, you don't know the culture. We joke about it in Washington State being so different. You really don't. There is a different culture.
I remember pushing a stroller around the neighborhood in St. Louis and saying, gotta make a friend today. And I went like walking, looking for other moms pushing strollers, and I found a lady, and I'm like, I know, I just moved here and I don't know anyone, will you be my friend? And I felt like a little kid, but it was one of the best things that I did, I feel like, as far as meeting people and growing
And always got plugged into churches.
And when you come from a small community, you're used to knowing everybody, so that
Yeah.
is a big change when you
It
move
is.
away, just newly
Definitely.
married, into a different state. Well, you have a couple kids, they're getting a little older. What is the conversation you have that you want to adopt? How does that come about?
That's all you.
I think we had never really had a number in our head that we knew of. We had never said, okay, we're gonna have 2 kids or 3 kids, but I had a higher number than he had. And so he had the number 2 in his head, and I didn't know that. And
Well, a
so,
girl for me and a boy for you, and we're through. It's kind of bookends. We had
Yeah.
one of each, we're good.
in his mind. But 2 years after Alec, that was our second one. I said, okay, I think we're ready to have another baby, and I want to look into adoption. And he was like, whoa, wait a second. We've already got 2. I think that's, just enough. It's perfect. We can travel. We can do whatever we want. We've got 2 kids.
Good job.
And so he said, and I was really persistent, and I said, well, would you at least pray about it? And he said, yeah, I'll pray about it. And so I started ordering materials from different companies about adoption, domestic and foreign, and I just was pulling everything I could in. And after, I guess, a week of him coming home from work every day, he said, okay, where do I sign? And you can go to work from there.
And going back up just a little bit, what is your feeling that you want to adopt rather than have another child,
Yeah, no,
biologically?
that's a good question. I guess we had seen other people in the church, other believers adopt, and we know that the Bible is pretty clear about taking care of orphans and widows, and we just felt like that's something that we could do. That's something that would bless our family. It's not something that you're taking on a burden. It's a blessing. And however God chooses to bless you with kids, then I think that's a great thing. So to me, it was really no different. I felt like there was a baby of ours somewhere. Now we just had the mission to go find this baby.
Well, the gospel is very clear. I think that we are adopted into God's family. So, the gospel in itself is a story of adoption. And so, the story goes, I'd go home and she'd put these DVDs in of these videos of these cute little kids, and I'd just start turning into a big puddle of goo. But the kicker was I had a 7-minute drive to work, mind you. And every day around that time, Stephen Curtis Chapman had put a song out called All I Want for Christmas is a Family. And I'd be driving, it seems like every time I'd get in the car, that would start playing, I'd be... And finally, after about a week, I said, okay, we need to adopt. There's so many kids out there that don't have a chance, don't have an opportunity to have what we have, a family. So we did. We jumped on it.
And so you're going through all these different organizations trying to find the right child.
Yeah.
with
We had a
that.
lot of paperwork come in. We were going through several of them. We didn't really know whether it was domestic or international that we were, leaning toward. Domestic, where we were in Ohio, they said that you had to have the child in your home for 2 years before it was final. And we knew we had 2 other kids, and that at the 2-year mark or anywhere in between, they could take the child out and say, no, the family's gotten straight off drugs or whatever. We want the child back. And so we felt like that was too big of a risk at the time with our older kids in the home. And so we started looking into international and Asia. And we had already sponsored some kids through World Vision. And so
From Vietnam.
they were both from Vietnam. It just happened to be. We didn't pick them. It was just kind of our kids picked them off of a table at a VeggieTales concert, and they were both Vietnamese. And so we were already kind of drawn to Vietnam. So we looked into China, Korea, and they had just guidelines that we weren't going to meet. And so we said, okay, well, let's look at Vietnam. And Vietnam had only been open at that time for a short amount of time, so there was not a lot of organizations that were adopting through Vietnam. But I got on a chat. It was back when, what did you have? They were like web pages to where you would go in and chat just on their web page. It wasn't like today, which was, and there were only a few of them. And the one that I went to just happened to be a lady who had adopted from Vietnam. And she said, I'd love to meet with you. I'm an hour and a half away. Would you meet me at a McDonald's and we can talk? And I thought, okay. And so we met her. She had girls from Vietnam, and she was working for an agency. And she said, you don't have to go with me, but I'd love to just help you because Vietnamese kids are just great, and Vietnamese people are great. And so that's kind of, we went home, prayed about it, and we were like, okay, where do we start? So
And
From
then you.
start to finish,
Mhm.
it was only 9 months. At the time,
It's like
everyone else.
pregnancy.
Yeah.
It's only 9
It
months.
Wow.
was kind of cool. Everyone else was saying prepare for 2 years, be ready for a long wait.
They'd never met my wife.
And
She was going to because we were close to Columbus, and so she was going to, the state capitol every day with the paperwork, doing everything.
So then how did that work? Do you meet the child?
No.
How does?
each
you just-
country does different things. Some of them will have 2 visits where you go over, you meet the child, and you come back and you wait.
Mhm.
With Vietnam, it was you go over, you meet the child, and you bring the child home, which was really appealing because you don't have to wait once you meet your kid,
Mhm.
And so that's what we did.
And they picked the child. So basically, we said, here's our constraints. This age group, this sex. I don't even know who this sex was.
I think we
I said girl.
I think we
might have
said girl, yeah.
Mhm.
Here's the window.
Girls are a higher number,
Uh-huh.
usually.
In Asia, yeah, or most globally. Yeah.
And so you put this is and you go through the 9-month process and you go over there and meet her.
This was after
Well, you get a
6
picture in the
months.
mail, the email back then, and it's like.
The lady called me and she said, "Did you check your email?" And I said, "No." And so you have to wait. We're out in the country waiting on dial-up, for it to load. I'm like, oh. And so as it starts to come up, it said, "Ha ha." And I thought, she's teasing me. This isn't a joke. You don't joke like this. So I started looking, and I'm talking to her on the phone at the same time, and she goes, "No, it's Hai Ha is her
That's her
name,
name,
her
Vietnamese
Vietnamese
name."
name." And so I said, "Okay, it's not a joke. She's real." And so, but at that time, we had told them we didn't want special needs because we didn't feel like we could handle it
Mhm.
with 2 other kids and being away from family. And so that was one of our constraints was a girl under 2, no special needs. And when we got to Vietnam, I think that's when Brent realized first that she had a spot on her head that was flat. And he said, "Have you noticed that she's not using her right side?" And so that's when we realized, something big is wrong, and we don't know what. And
Mhm.
so we just, I don't know, we were there for a month wondering.
Well, and
what's
God
going on.
basically just said, you're going to Nineveh. In other words, yeah, you didn't specify this, but this is your child. And it's funny because in Vietnam, they still do this. They're like, "Do you still want this child?" We're like, "Of course, God gave us. This is the child that God has designed to be in our family."
Mhm.
And they're like, "Well, she's broken." Because they still look at that to this day the same way. And we're like, "No, she's our child. We brought her home to
And it's
continue."
pretty crazy. She doesn't always admit that she's like us, but she's a lot like us. So,
Uh-huh.
in lots of ways.
She's a tar.
So how old were the other 2 kiddos at this time?
She would have been 19 months when we brought her home, which means Alec would have been
4 and 6.
6 and a half, 7.
So did they kind of understand the concept when
We brought them with us.
they went with you to
They went
Vietnam?
with us and we talked it up. They made T-shirts for their baby sister. We were preparing them all along the way that we're going to go get your baby sister. It
Mhm.
really wasn't. It would be like you would prepare for a pregnancy. I would think,
Mhm.
you're going to have a baby sister soon, and they really embraced her. She was pretty spoiled from the get-go.
She would try to buy them because she'd been raised in an orphanage. She'd go after them and they would just wrestle with her. They became family. We all became family very quickly,
Mhm.
and it's been a great journey.
So kind of explain your thoughts when you first went there to get her and not just about what you saw. That's the first time in Vietnam.
Of course, we didn't like it. I mean, we'll be very open. It's very different than Montague County. I mean, we're talking overpopulated, hot, sticky.
Not many air conditioners.
As we're talking,
Dirty.
you've been in Vietnam for a while, so you're wearing jackets.
Yeah.
And it's
And
like
we love
100
it now.
degrees here because
We're
you're
very
like-
Vietnamese. We love the food. We love the culture. We love the country. But back then, the food was so different. We didn't like the food. We didn't like the culture. There was the corruption. It was dirty. I mean, you name it. We did not like it. But jumping ahead, I guess. But I'll let you ask the question. I could keep going.
Well, and what year was that? That was
2006.
2006. So you're like, this is not a place we really want to be. Let's
It was
get her and
definitely
get
not,
out.
yeah,
And
it
that's
was,
exactly
and
what we
we got souvenirs because we knew that we wanted to have that for her as she grew up.
Or we may
you
never
know,
be back.
And we're not
Exactly.
coming back, if she wanted to when she was 18, we thought that might be something that we might do, but really, we just thought, grab our baby and go, and.
Mhm.
At the time, I was working for bonded. And we'd actually lived in Japan for a bit. We loved Japan. You know, Japan was clean. I mean, the food was great. We just loved the Asian culture. But then it was like Vietnam was like Mexico and Japan together. You know, it was like a Mexican version of Japan. And so we're like, so we did. We came back and didn't ever talk about it ever again up until 2 years later.
Well, I think to go back to Vietnam, while we were there, there was a time to where we went onto the beach and took our kids and we were playing on the beach. And one of the little girls that was there was running along the beach, probably 5 or 6 years old, and we had learned to say hello in Vietnamese, or I mean, we had very little, and so we told her hello in Vietnamese, and she just looked at us, and she goes, "Why don't you speak English?" And I went, "Whoa, wait a second, you speak English?" You know, and it was this little Vietnamese girl, and she's like, "Yeah, my parents are over there," and of course she's got white parents, and we started to talk to them, and we said, you know, "What are you doing here?" And they were missionaries, and we said, "Wow, you know, how is it?" And they said, "Well, you can't share the gospel. You know, you got to be, it's very close." And I don't think that we really realized that you couldn't share the gospel, that you couldn't actually talk to people about Jesus on the street because people didn't, you know, the government didn't want that. And so up until that point, we had been, like the day before, we had been sharing. People were telling us, "Oh, you're so great," because we had bought some stuff for the orphanage.
Well, yeah, I guess that was kind of the birth of Tiny Hearts of Hope. Was before we went, they gave us a video of Ava, and we said we can't just go over there and take your child away and not do something. So we started speaking in churches back then in 2006, and we took about $3,500 over to Ava's orphanage, and didn't know what that was going to look like. And we also got like 2 suitcases full. She had hit up dentists, McDonald's, and we got McDonald's toys, you know, toothbrushes, and brought 2 suitcases full and $3,500. And then we had, when we picked up Ava, we went to the orphanage director and said, "What do you have need of?" You know, and she gave us a big long list. You know, rice cookers, you know, all these things. And so we went, because we were only there for 1 or 2 days, and we went to a local place, had the taxi driver take us to a local store, and we went in and spent $3,500 in Vietnam. That would draw attention even today, you know, because that's a lot of money. $3,500 US goes a long way in Vietnam, especially in 2006. And we ended up filling up a whole truckload of stuff to take to this orphanage. And at the time, I didn't even jump on the time. At the time, you know, we didn't think much of it, but we were sitting there, we're in the store, we're just kind of, and it's open, you know, the doors are open and we're buying all this stuff. We drew a crowd. And you look out and there's like 30 people around, you know. And on the plane, Alec, our son, had a little Gideon Bible, you know. And one thing we noticed on the plane was in the front of the Gideon Bible, it has John 3:16 in like 30 languages, of which Vietnamese is there. And so, you know, God just kind of put it all together. And as we're buying these things, you know, we're out there talking to these people. We had our taxi driver, who was our translator, and they're asking questions. "What are you doing? Why are you doing this?" And it just came to us, "Hey, do you have that Bible?" And so Alec got the Bible, and we had him read John 3:16. And we said, "Do you understand?" Everybody seemed to understand, you know. And we didn't think much of it at the time. And to thank the taxi driver, we said, "Hey, can we take you out to eat and treat you?" And so we took him out to eat. And after we had done, of course, all the orphanage stuff, and he was just talking to us a little bit. And we started talking to him about Jesus, and all of a sudden he got really nervous. And he's kind of looking over his shoulder and stuff, and you could just tell he was extremely uncomfortable about talking about Jesus. And he said he was going to go out to smoke, and he left us. And so then we met that little girl, and that's when we started putting the pieces together, like, oh, so it's illegal. I mean, we were so naive.
And he didn't want to get in trouble. He didn't want anything to happen.
So associated with us. I mean, we were standing out anyway because we were the only, you know, white people around. So we kind of stood out.
So it's the cogs coming together. We did that. Didn't understand it fully until we met the missionary couple on the beach with their daughter, and then it was like, okay, we did not realize. And I think you said best about Ava's family.
It broke my heart because they were so closed. They said, and they were pretty fearful. They just said, "We can't share unless, you know, we know people really close." So they were even hesitant to tell us why they were there. It was very secretive. And so when we started asking questions, they just got nervous and they said, "We really can't share. You know, we'll get kicked out or worse, or you know." And I just thought, how's my baby girl's family ever going to hear about Jesus if the people that are here are scared? How do we share? And so that was our that was the beginning of Tiny Hearts, is let's go.
We like to think it was, but then we came back for 2 years and it was such a hard pill to swallow.
We didn't know it was the beginning.
We didn't know, again, we didn't want to go back.
So what happens that 2 years? Is God working in your heart, or are there conversations you're having about Vietnam and where she's
I don't think
from?
there were any conversations.
We never talked about it. It was funny, God was working on both of our hearts independently, and I remember talking to her and just, I know at that time I had felt that heavy burden and been fighting it, been swallowed, and just push it to the side, push it to the
And
side.
I don't want to go
After a
back.
year and
I
a
don't want to
half.
go back there.
Yeah, it was a
Don't
year
be
and a half,
telling
and
me
I don't
that.
want to go back there. And then I looked at her, and every time I say this, I get goosebumps because I remember her face, and I said, honey, I think we're supposed to be in Vietnam. That's why I get goosebumps. And it's because I looked at her, and she said, I feel the same way. I've been feeling the
We
same
both
way.
knew it, but neither one of us wanted to say it because we didn't want to go.
Mm-hmm.
So it wasn't comfortable. It wasn't clean. It was all of these things that it wasn't a place we wanted to go to.
Mm-hmm.
It's funny how God connects things. And so but basically, what do? When God does you, or tells you to do something you don't want to do, what do? You do the Gideon thing. You know, you're like, I'm going to put the fleece out. Okay, God, you said go to Vietnam, but you got to do this first. And so we put these obstacles in our mind that were they could be moved. And so God moved, and it was a good friend of ours put it this way: He gives you kingdom clarity, and there was kingdom clarity that we were supposed to go to Vietnam. And we could go into long details about that, but it was very clear. By the obstacles moving, by the circumstances falling in such a way that we knew it was divine intervention. And we said, you know what, okay, I guess we're going. In 2000 and, what would that be, 2008, we moved over to Vietnam, May 29th.
So how does that look because you're moving there? How does
We were in Ohio at the time.
Yeah,
so
and you have a good job.
I had a great job working for Honda as a design engineer. God blessed us financially with stupid money compared to the rest of the world. You don't realize how wealthy even us here in Montague County are. And we were very blessed. And so what does that look like? We just said, okay, God, we're trusting you. And I got a job working in Texarkana, Texas. We tried to sell our house and moved everything down here and put it in storage at my mom's place out near Sunset.
Mm-hmm.
And we just started. I found a job teaching English, which is funny because we don't speak English. We're Texans. Always make that joke, found a place that would train me to be a teacher because you couldn't go in and say we're going to be missionaries. We want to tell people about Jesus. You can't go into a communist country.
So it's not like you sold everything,
That's not,
hopped on a plane, and said we're missionaries.
you can't do that. And so I'm like, how do we get in? And again, when God pieces things together, it just works out. And I just started looking around, and there was a place that would train us how to be an English teacher. And next
You
thing
need an income.
Yeah, I think,
well, it's funny. We had
So
three kids, and we get pregnant. And so we're pregnant with the fourth kid. We've already got the ball rolling, and Vietnam is happening.
And that wasn't really planned. That's not like we're going to have a fourth.
We pee on the stick, and we're like, okay, God.
Then you realize God's got jokes.
He does.
Yes, and we both nearly passed out.
We did.
This
So
is
we're
not
kind of
planned.
upset because we didn't think that was feasible, And
Uh-huh.
I remember we're like, are we supposed to go, God? And I always make a joke, We went over there, and they've been having babies over there for thousands of years. They knew exactly what to do.
Yeah, we made the joke, but we both contemplated, like, do we wait until this baby is, 6 months or a year or 4 years, or what are you saying
Because you
now?
find out pregnant, you're going to be leaving shortly.
Yeah, the baby's not gonna be born in America if we leave,
Yeah.
right? And
Uh-huh.
so.
You start having faith in American medicine. You realize, where is your faith? Is it in this government? Is it in this country? Not to say that this country's not great, but truly your faith needs to reside in God. And we said, okay, God.
And you're moving to a country with 0 contacts, like you don't know anyone.
Don't know the language, don't know the culture.
You don't have a church family to plug
Don't
into.
have a church family, but God does. And that's how we flew over, and the very first person we met, loved Jesus.
Yep, the first person that met us through the language course that we were going through, she said, okay, this is
To
weird.
teach
You have to
English.
tell me.
Yep.
Uh-huh.
She said, you really have to tell me why you're bringing your family, because normally it's a guy or a girl, one
Single.
person, single
Uh-huh.
person, or a couple at the most, but never kids. And we had 3 kids, and I was pregnant, pretty obviously pregnant. And she was like, you gotta tell me what's going on. I'm like, why are you doing this? And so we just told her, and she said, oh my goodness, I'm a believer too. I love Jesus. And so it's so cool how God, the first person we meet off the plane, loves Jesus, and God had that connection. There's such a small amount at that time of believers in, at least in Ho Chi Minh City, more in the country maybe, but not a whole lot of people around that were open to tell you even.
Again, it's so neat to see how God orchestrates every facet of everything. Because we went over trusting, we were pregnant. Again, it was so foreign to us, and yet God just shows up. And we call her Auntie Hen. Our kids know her as Auntie Hen, and she became an intricate part of the ministry, close family, and we still love her to this day.
So you go over there to teach English. What does it do? How do you start sharing the gospel? Start sharing the word?
As a teacher, what I've realized, and I'm not educated to be a teacher, but what I realize is when you have 30 kids in a room for an hour, that is such a ministry opportunity. So I would use supplemental material that would be gospel driven. I would take a Toby Mac song and I would blank out lyrics and give them that, and they would have to listen to the lyrics, and I would explain to them what the lyrics meant. That's just a small example. And so I think just who we are and how we are, we are people that always share our faith. We always talk about God. And so our neighbors knew and stuff. But I think very early on, we were always children driven. And so it's like we need to go to an orphanage. And we would. We'd go to an orphanage, just be me, her, of course our kids and Auntie Hen and maybe a few other people. And we would just go and take rice and, take, milk or whatever they needed. And it just kind of started to come together. We always seem to be driven by kids. Because what we now know, of course, with the experience of being over there, children ministry is a great opportunity for us to open up that opportunity to build that bridge, to share the gospel. So we meet those physical needs. We meet those, all these needs, on the secular level, but then that gives us an opportunity to share our faith. And again, mind you, that Vietnam is a communist country. Things to do like that are illegal. And so you can't just walk up and say, hey, let me tell you about Jesus. And so we would do that by going to orphanages, and it started looking like VBS. We would show up and we would play games, and it would all be gospel centered, and we would do stories. And of course, what was the story we were telling? We were telling a story about this guy named Jesus. And the more we did what we did, the more people came alongside us. And what I mean by that is we were getting, I guess we formed the organization August 08 as a 501c3, because we knew people wouldn't donate to Brent and Stacy Tarr. But if we had some legitimacy, that would give us something, because we didn't go with a supporting church. We weren't getting a paycheck.
You were fully supporting yourselves by working, and
so it was like working full time 6 days a week. She's homeschooling, new baby.
And we thought when we moved over there we were going to be living in the countryside in a dirt floor, shack, and we ended up getting a house, but they're like on top of each other. So the neighborhood was really, really close. It's super hot. There's no breeze because everything's touching all the walls, and so it was really different from what we expected. But
very much so.
We were kind of hoping for the other. We hoped to be outside of the city, and God kind of locked us into Ho Chi Minh City, which is a really big city.
then the orphanages you were going to were in the city?
Some, and then some would be out in the countryside. And it'd be just like our friend that God connected us to. Auntie Hen would say, hey, I found out there's this place, let's go, and she would help us just connect the dots. And as it got bigger, people would hear about what we were doing. And so people in Ho Chi Minh City, mostly Vietnamese, would say, hey, can we do this? Because they'd never done that. That was so foreign for them to help people that were poor. And so they started tagging along with us and just giving us the physical. And then I think our first year in 2008, we got about $4,000 as a nonprofit, and then $8,000. And so
at that time at the nonprofit, you were Tiny Hearts of Hope.
We were registered as Tiny Hearts of Hope, but it
not
wasn't
knowing
much.
what that would come of. Just that was your
Yes.
nonprofit.
Yeah.
That's exactly. We didn't know what it was going to look like, and so then we started, of course, getting homesick and realizing, okay, let's go back home and do fundraising. So we would come home for 3 months, and we would travel all over the U.S. and speak to basically anybody that would listen to us. Homeschool group, women's or men's meetings. Or
Tell the story because it was so funny. We would put all of our stuff on top of our minivan to go drive across the whole U.S. and and we lost a potty chair in Arkansas one time. It blew off on the road, and so because we were potty trained while we were driving across country, so we donated a potty chair to the Arkansas.
They didn't know what it was. Don't worry. This hat, what is it? Put that on.
And so, you're going around trying to get money. This time just to go back to the orphanages, to give to the orphanages that are there.
Well, and so the next year was 8,000. The next year, I think it was about 16,000. And we're even to this day, very small as far as an organization goes. We are online. You can see we're very transparent. You can see how much money comes in. But we would take whatever we get, and basically, I was teaching, so we were living off of that. And then we would do, if we had this amount of money, we would do whatever. And it became the orphanage stuff. But then the orphanages became familiar with us, and they would say, hey, I got this medical need, or hey, can you help with this education? These children need education. And then we started working on a weekly basis where we would go to this one orphanage and we would give them ourselves. We would actually go and teach English every Tuesday. And then we started building relationships with these kids. And it continued to grow. As the needs became more and more clear, we realized, and we would start trying to do stuff for that specific part. And so in 2011, we started the Hope House, which is an actual orphanage where we take street kids in, and that's been going on since 2011. And we've had over 50 kids come in, of which some of them have only known us. Mm-hmm. So I mean, they've come in so young, and they're still with us. And it's probably one of our favorite ministries. In 2012, we started the Shop of Hope, which is a secondhand store. Because in Vietnam and a lot of countries throughout the world, handicapped people are second-class citizens. So in Vietnam, because of the war, because of the Agent Orange and all that, you have a higher percentage of handicap compared to, say, like America. Mm-hmm. And so you would see people on the street begging or selling things. You would see handicapped people like crawling on a piece of cardboard, but they're selling water to make a living. And so we started a secondhand store, and I guess we basically would take donations, and then our staff, which was all handicapped or underprivileged, we taught them how to do retail. And it was interesting because we would actually pay them more than minimum wage. So here they are, given an opportunity that they would never, ever be given otherwise. And,
so more than minimum wage in the United States, or more
in Vietnam?
So American dollars, how much do they get paid?
Well, I mean, now it's about 75 cents. I think it's 15,000. Probably about 75 cents. $15,000. So about 75 cents an hour. I think it was.
Isn't that crazy to think when we look at our minimum wage and we're going, wow.
And that, I mean, they can live on that. That's
exactly. And that's even gives them a better amount than they could make elsewhere.
Mm-hmm.
And then as you start doing what you do, and you start realizing there's other people doing other things, and we started partnering with other ministries. In Vietnam, we're in the south in Ho Chi Minh City, and there's a place in Da Nang, the central part, called Orphan Voice. We became good friends with them. There's an organization up in the north in Hanoi called Blue Dragon. We started partnering with them, and so sometimes they would write us and say we need medical help, and we would have contacts with all the good hospitals in Saigon. They would send somebody down from their organization that needed surgery. And again, it seems like as you live your life for Christ, you see these connecting dots. And God always is there before you. While it was hard to get on a plane with a pregnant wife to a hard-to-live country, God was there. He shows up every time. There's nothing like it. There's no better place to be than God's will. It really is.
And as you talk, and people are encouraged to help and be a part of that, I keep seeing that you serve first. You serve and you give and you meet those needs, and then they're open to listen. It's not you go in and say, this is what you should do, this is when those needs are met, because if we're hungry or thirsty, it's hard to listen to anything else because all we can think about is my physical needs. And I think that's just what Christ did. He served. And I think that's what we're called to do. And when we do that, we definitely, it makes a difference to people. When people notice that and they want to be a part of that. Just other people wanted to go to the orphanages and help and be, that's something they've never seen before.
Yeah.
How can we feel underprivileged, but how can we give to even people more underprivileged?
That's exactly right.
And so, so through this process, has there been a time when it's been close that the government says, what are you doing? You know, that's,
Again, you know, God, as you see the pieces come together, God is in all things, and you realize there's been so many close calls. There's been so many opportunities where, you know, we should have been kicked out, or we should have, you know, we've had our house raided, the police have come in and inspected, or we're taking a box of 50 Bibles, which are completely illegal, and we're going to take them to a location. And yet God always seems to show up. And yeah, I mean, even to this day, we had a doctor's team 7 years ago that got shut down by the government, and the government shows up with AK-47s, and I mean, it was legit. And I remember the doctors, they're just amazed. They're like, they'd never seen anything like that, you know. And this wasn't even gospel center. We were just doing medical. You know, we're just there meeting the physical needs, doing doctor's appointments and giving out medications and whatnot. And they're just like, no. And so we sat down with the government officials and we tried to persuade them to allow us to do it. You know, but it's just one of those things. It still was a blessing. And somebody said the other day, you know, they put us in a box. Oh man, Brent and Stacy, they're so great. They're doing all this. And I feel like we're not even close, because there's people in Vietnam that have given up so much more than we can even fathom. Because the worst that could ever happen to us, I think, like some friends of ours, you get caught doing what we do, they just kick you out. Okay, you're American. We're protected by the U.S. government. So, you know, I mean, as long as you don't kill somebody or something big, but I mean, okay, your visas revoked, you need to leave kind of thing. But there are people in Vietnam that gave up their lives for the gospel in such a way that we can't even comprehend. So people look at us like we're all that, and we're like, no. I mean, there's a woman named Mintu in an orphanage, and she is something else. She takes care of now 75 kids, of which most of them are handicapped, and she's a good mom. She's a super mom. Yeah. And Pastor Lynn tells us stories about how when Vietnam fell in August 30th, 1975, you know, the communists came down and took over Saigon. And anybody that helped the U.S. or anybody that was religious, because communism's like get rid of religion, he was a pastor then, he gets thrown into a concentration camp or a re-education camp. And he tells stories, and you're just sitting there, your jaw just drops. He's like, he met his wife there, and they got bamboo rings and got married in a concentration camp. As he's talking to us, he doesn't even think about it. He goes, yeah, we were asking about persecution today, and he goes, oh, it's nothing now. When I was in the concentration camp, they used to hit me with the, what's the end of the gun called? I'm like, he got hit with the butt of the gun, you know, and stuff. And you're just like, we're nothing, you know. So there's so many more people throughout the world, not just Vietnam, that give up a lot.
Hey, Voice of the Martyr bought him a motorcycle when we were there, and he was so excited. He said, now I can put more Bibles on my motorcycle to carry. Because that's how you transport everything, right? You put boxes on the back of your motorcycle and carry them around. So that was encouraging to us.
And so then you just have to, so that's how you get around is on a motorcycle?
We've always, yeah. I guess even, and I'm going to jump out of myself and look at my wife here. Now, I like to think, you know, man, I grew up on dirt bikes and out here in the country. My wife can rock it. I'm going to tell you why. Because I did all those things, and when I went to the motorcycle there, it wasn't a big deal. She didn't grow up on it. She started off on a motorcycle, I mean, 1 week after having a baby. And so she's got AJ, our son, strapped to her chest, and she's got another kid, and I've got a kid, or 2 kids, and she's got 2 kids, and we're driving around in Ho Chi Minh City. And for your listeners, just go to Saigon traffic or Ho Chi Minh traffic. There's 10 million motorbikes, and it's just insanity, the rules, and here she is, newly, and I had to push her. She didn't want to do it. And I'm like, we just got to do it, honey, because we couldn't afford taxis, because that's kind of an up thing, you know. And so we got motorbikes, and we've always been like the Vietnamese. We get on mopeds, and a family of 7 on 2 mopeds.
And there's no car seats or anything like that. You just hop on and strap on.
There's a little belt. She straps on.
I think one of the first motorcycle rides that I had that I really got scared. I mean, you're always scared, right? It's pretty intense at first. I had AJ on, and I had just moved him from the front to the back, so he would have been maybe 4 weeks old. Put him on the back, and I was coming out of my alleyway, a narrow alley, and an old man who had cataracts over his eyes, couldn't see anything, he hit me. And my bike was really heavy. It was an Attila, which I don't know if they even have those in the US, but a really heavy bike. And if it were to go down, I couldn't get it back up. And so as he hit me, my bike went and it leaned down, and my kickstand that was on the right sparked. It was dragging on the road, and I was going about 30 miles an hour, and I'm still driving. my bike fishtails and, you know, swerves quite a bit. And I had 2 kids on, my baby and then an older kid. And the man I could see in my mirror, he went down spinning. And it was almost like God just picked us straight up. And so I can almost see him just straightening us up. And that builds faith big time, because I thought, okay, you know, because if AJ would have gone down, there's no helmet, you know, and he was 4 weeks old, his head would have been on the concrete. He probably wouldn't have made it. And so just the faith in little accidents like that, you go, okay, God's with me, I got this. And so.
But it is very much a part of, it is a very much a part of the Vietnamese culture, is motorcycles. Cars are expensive, highly taxed, because the infrastructure can't support anybody driving cars. And so from early on, we've always been on motorcycles. And our kids love it to this day. It's our favorite part of Vietnam.
Our older kids learned to drive on motorcycles in Vietnam.
As they became
Before they had their
teenagers.
license here.
Yeah, as they became and it's the best part, it's the best way to feel Saigon, because Saigon is such a vibrant city, and you've got the smells, you've got the sounds. It is just the best way to see Saigon is on the back or driving a motorcycle.
So how long you're there, do you go, we're kind of getting used to it? Is it a while when are there times where you say?
First year when I was pregnant, you know, the first couple months, and then that first year, I remember screaming and going crazy inside my house. I had a breakdown, and I had a glass wall, and it's hot, and the people outside were coming up and they were staring all day long, and I had just
Like
had
just staring at-
staring at the people that were living.
You're
there.
like an animal in a cage, because you're the only white people in the neighborhood. And Vietnamese houses, it is such communal living. They can basically see inside your house, and we had a clear glass. I guess it was
And
doors.
so they just kept staring.
They would bring
all
their
day.
friends over and say, "Come look at the foreigners," and they would look in.
It was like you were at the zoo and you were the featured animal. And I thought, oh, I can't handle this. And finally he came in and I had just started screaming and throwing my arms up in the air. And I thought, if you want something to look at, I'll show you. And so I kind of went crazy, had a meltdown, and they didn't come back to my window.
They were like, "Oh, well."
I think they thought I was possessed. And so it was pretty funny because they stayed away, and I delivered a few weeks later, and I thought, oh, this is going to be crazy. You know, I had to go outside my house. I had been going out, but still, it was embarrassing.
But you know what?
They were so sweet.
Let me explain this. Okay, so in Saigon, most people live down these narrow alleyways, you know, and so you don't. For us to get dropped off, and we did get dropped off by a taxi, we'd have to walk about a quarter mile just to get to our house. We weren't obviously
Because they can't pull up that drop.
They can't pull up, and she had just delivered, and it was crazy because she'd had that outburst, but the whole community came out to see the baby and us. And you see this little old lady about that thin. She has the conical hat, and she comes, and she was probably 140. I mean, I say it all, Ken. She's probably in her 80s though. And she takes my wife's hand. She's frail little old lady. She helps my wife all the way down the alley, you know. And she's just going along, just speaking. And at that time, we were learning the language, but we didn't really have a grasp of it. And she's just talking away. And we get to our house, and there's a step up to our house, and she takes the baby and helps my wife up. Just a beautiful picture of Vietnam culture. Vietnam culture is very, very, very family oriented.
Vietnamese people are very loving.
Very loving, and we have learned a lot from the Vietnamese culture. Granted, they can learn from the Western culture and some of the things we bring to the table. That we can learn a lot from them as well.
And is it, so 2008, you're there, you learn the language, you're there.
No, 2008 we have.
Well, 2008 you haven't, but you're learning the language.
Yeah.
You have 5 kids, so was your fifth
Fifth kid
kid
was
born there?
2013.
Born there.
Yeah. So
Let me think. So it'll be 2008. AJ was born in 2014. 2013. I know. I'm here for the day. That's the only reason I'm here, guys. She's the best part of this. 2013. So we had Ava, who we adopted, obviously was born there, and then AJ 2008, and then Amia was born 2013. And so all in pretty much the same area, except Ava was born in the central part of the country.
and then you have the orphanage going,
2011. Yep.
and you have the Hope House.
Yep. And then we have a scholarship program we started in 2000 and I think it was 2013, and we started doing scholarships again.
Scholarships for
School.
For school. Well, let me back up. So we started the Hope House, and we were going to countryside places. It was going from orphanages now to like tribal areas where the tribal people were, because they're statistically some of the poorest of the poor in Vietnam. And so we realized the poorest people were in these areas, so we would go and kind of do the same thing we were doing in the orphanage, but it kind of morphed into something else. And we started just more focusing on food distribution, not the VBS, but we would use the VBS platform, but then also just food. These people are dirt poor. We're talking $30, $40 a month for a family of 5, 6.
Mhm.
You know, they're cashew farmers, they're coffee farmers. They're just, I mean, just truly some of the poorest of the poor in Vietnam. And as we were doing this, they came to us and said, would you mind starting another house for these kids? And they give us a whole file of all these pictures of these kids. And every picture just breaks your heart. And it's like, these kids need homes. They need homes. But then we look and we go to the next page and it had a picture of this kid's family. And so they wanted to give us their kids to give them a better life, but they were still a family.
Mhm.
And at that time, Stacy was reading a book called Urban Halo about a guy in Cambodia, and started reading that. And she told me one of the things that he had determined, and it was scientifically proven, kids don't develop as well in like orphanages opposed to like a family structured home.
Mhm.
And so in Cambodia, this guy had started these homes, kind of like our Hope House, and he had learned that if you have more of a family structure, they do better.
Mhm.
And so we were like, why don't we take these kids out of a family setting? So at that time, we went to a food distribution program where it was like, okay, we'll interview these families, see if they have need, and then we'll support them for 1 year, you know, with food.
Mhm.
But one of the stipulations is they have to keep the kids in school, because when you're in a situation where there's such poverty, these people will pull their kids out of school to help with cashew farming, to help with coffee or whatever, tea leaves.
Mhm.
And so they didn't understand the importance of education. So we worked through local churches out in the countryside. They helped us facilitate it because it might be 2, 3, 4 hours away from Saigon. We weren't there. We didn't have hands-on there. And we said, make sure the kids stay in school. And if they get to where they're not staying in school, we're going to pull them out of the program.
Mhm.
So we kind of used the food as a bribery tool. And then that morphed into the scholarship program, the food distribution. And we would go for a full year, and every month we would go and say, here's the food boxes. Mind you, it's about $25 to $35 worth of goods in a box. But if your family's making $25 to $35 a month for a family of 6 or 7, that's a lot to them. And we try to obviously hit nutrition, hygiene, things of that nature in the boxes. And so we tried to go every month and put the boxes out. They would come and they'd have to listen to us for an hour and a half. And we developed 12 programs, of which one of them was totally sharing the gospel. One of them was anti-human trafficking education, because these were the prime targets for human trafficking.
Mhm.
One of them was CPR first aid. One of them was clean water purification, the importance of clean water, hygiene, sanitation. You know, so we developed all these programs, and every month they would have to listen to us, and then we'd give them the food box.
And you have a different program each
Month. Every month.
And so do you come up with those programs with the churches, or do the two of you come up?
We would come up with it, and then by that time, I'd stepped away from teaching because we didn't have enough time. And so we started pulling from the funds. We started obviously growing as a nonprofit, so it was like we prayed about it. I'm like, I'm about to quit teaching English. Our check that was coming in is going to stop coming in. Can we do this? And we did. We just took a leap of faith, and ministry became full time at that point. And we didn't know what it was going to look like, but yeah.
And that's about how many years after you were there?
It's 2013 maybe, so I probably talked about 5 years, 2008, 2013. Yeah.
Mhm.
And it was a big step, because at that time we had 5 kids, mind you. And but the ministry just kept growing and growing and growing. And there was less and less of us as far as time goes. It was like I had to go teach Monday through Saturday because they go to school on Saturday, and it was just like it became too much. She's homeschooling, but so we started hiring people. We started really changing our business model of what it looked like. And so we said, okay, we're going to start using funds for this, and we're going to start living off of this, but we're also going to start hiring people. And we did. And even to this day, we have 8 staff, and they love Jesus, and they own it. We're so proud of them.
Mm-hmm. And so when you started, what you see now, is that what you had envisioned, or was it just to help?
Have we even talked about that? I don't know that we had a vision. I think our vision probably was to get something similar, maybe not. I mean, I think that it's more, there's so many needs. It's spread out
It's
so
overwhelming.
much.
Mhm.
We've talked about that many times, like how do we narrow our focus down to certain areas because we feel like we can't say no, and there's so many true needs. And so we branched out further than we thought that we ever would have. We both think it was probably orphan work that we felt called to.
But then it just grew into medical missions. We were doing medical surgeries. We were working with the best hospitals and relationships we're starting to build there. And it was always like what we loved about the Tiny Hearts, and even to this day I feel it. It's always been a loaves and fishes kind of ministry. In other words, we didn't have a lot of money, yet God always seemed to show up. And so we would reach out to a foreign doctor and say, look, I got this kid out in the countryside and he needs surgery. What do you think? And they would do it. Now, these were secular people most of the time, but God connected the pieces. And it just blows us away because we look at what the fruit that has been a part of the ministry and how little finances we've always had. But God just always multiplies it, like the loaves and fishes.
And so things are going well. You're meeting needs. You're helping. 2020 comes. COVID.
Anybody remember that? What was that? COVID? What is that? I remember something. It didn't seem to turn the world upside down. It's just, and you look at it now, and you're like, do we even talk about it anymore? 2020, we were just here doing fundraising, December 2019. And we rushed back because we had a doctor's team, January 2020. So we get back, and it was one of those hit the ground running kind of things. We had done fundraising, and we've done well, and we're going back. Of course, nobody knows anything about COVID. We bring these doctors over, and they're talking to us. And, we're on the bus with them. We take them out to the countryside. We're kind of the hands and feet, and they bring the doctor's team. They're based out of Tulsa. It's a nonprofit as well. And they're talking about COVID, Of course, medical talk. We don't, whatever. Of course, they leave, and then we're living in Vietnam. We're getting back to work. We're here, and we got big plans and whatever. We started branching out more in the education sector at that time. Had bought this big old box somebody had donated to us that had 20 laptops. We were going to go out and set up computer labs out in the countryside. And next thing you know, as we never taken Vietnamese formal training. We just learned living with people. And we're on the back. You remember this, right? We just kept hearing this new Vietnamese word. We're like, virus corona. We're like, what is that?
They haven't ever heard that before.
One of my friends,
we never heard that.
One of AJ's friends' moms came to me and she said, how's your family in America with virus corona? And I said, I don't know what that is. I don't know. And so then we started talking, and she was explaining to me, because she didn't speak English. It's when you're sick and you have to speak. Haven't you heard of it? It's all around the world. And then I went, oh, the coronavirus. Okay, I get it. And so it was.
Everything started shutting. You start seeing, because
the city started to shut down pretty quick.
We were part of an international church, and so we were connected with a lot of people. They were there for business. They're doing a lot of oil drilling in the China Sea, so there were people there for Exxon or Mobil, and there would be people making furniture in Vietnam. So we go to the international church, and then what happened was everybody's talking about it. Next thing you know, these big companies are pulling these people out. You've got to get out. The world's about to shut down. We get an email from the U.S. State Department because we were connected. When you live overseas, they tell you to register and they'll send you emails and stuff. And it's like the world's about to shut down, maybe for 18 months. And of course, that seems so foreign. And we're like, no. And we seem to hold it off more than most. And then finally, we're like, okay, I think we need to pull out. And we landed here April 1st, 2020. And it shut down like 3 days after that. But we got stuck in Qatar. At that time, the flight out got canceled. It was just such a weird time. And then we flew to Qatar, and it's like, okay, we can't get out of the airport, but your flight's been canceled. We're like, we're in an airport. We got all our kids. We're like, what's this look like? And we finally made it home, April 1st, 2020.
And then have you gone back since? You about to go back?
We went back last year.
And then how long did you go back?
1 month. And at that time, we hadn't been there since COVID. We didn't know what that looked like. The staff had been continuing the work, limited, of course. A lot of the work we do is like 200 or 300 people are around us. And so obviously COVID shut that kind of work down. We're doing those food distributions. We're doing the education programs. And just shut down. And so our staff was still working. We still had the Shop of Hope. Obviously, the Hope House, the orphanage was still running. A lot of our programs had been dampened. And so we kind of obviously we're still talking to our staff. We're still managing. We're still waiting for the doors to open. In the midst of that, though, I think we realized that God had brought us into a different season in our life, and we had come home to both our parents aging. And we realized, God knew what he was doing. And we've always told people, we're going to die in Vietnam. They're going to bury us there. That's where we're meant to be. And it would take something like a COVID for us to come back home. So in the midst of that 18 or 24 months, whatever it was, that we couldn't go back, we realized we needed to be here to take care of our parents. And that's kind of that's the stage we're in now. And so we're still managing staff. And we're going back for a month. But that first time going back, I remember going back, and I'm so proud. We were proud of our staff. We didn't go back as a break down the door, here's how you're going to do it. We went back as spectators. And so wanted to see how they were doing it. And their vision was different than ours, and I praise God for it, because God showed up and worked in their hearts, and they were taking ownership, and they had a different vision than what we had envisioned, and we were proud of it. It was almost like the gospel, and how when Paul was writing to the early church and the letters, and we just almost sat back as proud parents of our staff, and to this day we're still proud of them. They're beautiful people, they love Jesus, and they're doing good work. And so we're going back this time. It's like our Vietnam family, and every time we go, we cry when we leave. And, we're just going to go back and support, and obviously we're still managing at night. I work here in town. She's homeschooling. I work at Bowie Industries, and so God has blessed us with those dots being connected. I got a job opportunity with the Bowie Industries. Has been great. They allow me to go back and do this kind of thing. Ministry's still happening, and we're going to go back. And of course, our hearts are going to be heavy. We're going to have to get back on a plane, and we don't want to, but we
Get
know
back on a plane to come back.
come back. Every time we do, it's hard, because our hearts are still in Vietnam, but our parents aren't doing real well.
So you have
It's like
to-
part of your heart's in both countries.
Yeah.
I wish God could just pull them a little closer, because someday he will.
Yes.
And for now, you're able to take care of aging parents, able to have a great staff that is able to continue the mission work, and you can still manage it because of technology from afar,
Yeah.
and still have that blessing. So, and you do see yourselves eventually going back.
It just seems like such a part of us, and even our kids. We are all very Vietnamese. We take our shoes off at the door. Some of the things that we do are very Vietnamese, and we don't even know it. And so I can obviously we can only speak for us. We've had that conversation. I think we do see ourselves going back. But of course, now our kids are growing up, and we've got our second one about to graduate college, and they're starting their own journeys in life. But I still think they love Vietnam, but I don't think they'll go back. But obviously,
So that looks a little different as they get older,
Yeah.
and start careers and families, and just starts a
I
different.
don't know where everybody's gonna be,
But I think from looking at all the dots through your life, they're connected and they're taken care of because of faith. And so, and I think that it gives hope to take the next step, because whether we know what it looks like or not, because he's met every need.
He's met every need, and he's connected.
Needs you
the
didn't
dots.
know you had.
There's no doubt. We always look back, and it's just some of the stories. I mean, we could break your heart with some stuff, things that happened, and God prepared us, and just how everything just connects. It's truly God, divine intervention, and what a joy to be in that story, to be a part of that story. People are like, you should write this down, and it's like, we probably should, because we're getting older, we're forgetting, but we've lived such a blessed life to be a small part of what God's doing, what his hand's doing in the country. And honestly, I think such a pivotal time in Vietnam history. The gospel is exploding in Vietnam, whereas here, churches are drying up, and people have turned numb to the gospel. But in Vietnam, people are thirsty for it. They've never heard about this hope in Christ, and it's a beautiful thing. And you just see people give up so much for the gospel. And here, you just see people going, I wish he would stop talking. Golden crowds about them, You know what I mean?
Yes.
So it's just a different passion, a different love. So.
And I think so many times, this series is called World Impactors. And I think sometimes we think, well, I can't make an impact on the world. And I'm sure if I talk to 15 and 17-year-old Brent and Stacy, say, I'm not going to make an impact on the world. I'm go to a small town school. I mean, what am I going to do in this world? And through the different experiences in your life, he starts to change you. He starts to make those impressions on your life. I always like to say that God doesn't call the qualified, he qualifies the called.
There's no doubt.
And every step of the way, he keeps qualifying you in little ways. And,
That's true.
and keeps putting that, whether it's having to come back and learn to manage from afar, going back to visit. And probably even appreciating more when you go back than when you were there. Because you realize your heart grows fonder when it's gone.
There's no doubt.
And it probably gives you new perspective when you go back.
I think it does.
And you leaving would have never given your staff the opportunity to
Step up.
and grow.
That's true.
And maybe change in a way that you didn't see.
Well, we always speak at churches across, and I'm always like, I'm just a hillbilly from Bowie, Texas. And it's true, but I love the fact that when I read my Bible, I just see ordinary people and God doing extraordinary things. In such a way, you have to give God the glory. And that's who we are. We're nothing special. I mean, I think you're exactly right. God does qualify the called. And I didn't go to school. We didn't go to school to be, theologian. We just read the Word and allowed God to direct us. And so we probably don't fit in the box. We seem to always never fit in the box. I always joke that we're kind of like the blue collar missionaries, the trailer trash missionaries. But God shows up, and it's all to give Him the glory, because people. Believe me, anybody listening to this, they know us. They're like, that's Brent Tarr. Oh, let me tell you about that guy. He was over there eating crayons in 10th grade. Instead of graduating from gold. I graduated top 6 in my class.
We're only 6.
I was about to say, how many were there?
So I'll take that.
Yeah, but and you're right. It doesn't have to. I think we think that sometimes mission work or just sharing the gospel has to look fancy.
Yeah.
Like we have to know the Bible in and out and what it means, and we need to know all the versions and all that. And we don't.
Not even
When we
close.
share it in our way, how we interpret it, and we share by serving.
Mm-hmm.
And before you even share the gospel, you serve the people.
You live it out. You have to live the gospel out, and that's what tells people about Christ. What is it they often say? Often in the Bible they're going to read is your life. And so not many people are going to go, I'm going to learn about Jesus. They're going to see somebody. And like the new kids, or what they call Newsboys song, Shine. Shine, let them wonder what you got. Let them wonder why they're not on the outside looking in. So in other words, you're shining. Why does he look different than everybody else? Why is he shining? I want a piece of that. And then that makes them thirsty for the gospel. And yeah, let me tell you why I look like this, because this guy named Jesus changed the world. He changed my life. He can change yours. You're exactly right, Aaron.
And I think even though the country is communist and blocked to the gospel a lot, there's been times where I've seen Brent even go into like the police department to do different, I guess it was getting your driver's license or doing something. And they just love his enthusiasm and his personality of being able to talk to them in their language and just love on them and care about them. And they're open to have you share, and so you have those spots where it would normally be like totally blocked, but we're able to share a little bit. And so God, just seeing him provide those opportunities builds encouragement.
Stacy cutting hair in an orphanage or feeding, and we have this mindset that orphan ministry is a beautiful thing, like a nursery or something in church, and it's really not. It's quite ugly, to be honest with you. You're feeding kids and they're spitting on you, or it's not what people expect it to be, and it's hard. And God had provided me with a wife that is probably, by far the best mom I've ever seen. But she's not just a mom to my kids, she's a mom to all these kids. And so I see her going to the orphanage, and she brings in a whole new light, and I'm just like, man. And again, she's doing that shining that points people to Christ. Because she still rocks the world. You do, I know you're going to hate me for that.
And as you speak of Vietnamese and Americans, and you talk about how you reach them, and it's human connection. It's not Vietnamese, American, Chinese, Japanese. It's human connection. And just like going into the police station, making that connection with them. How do you connect with them on that level? Speaking their language, it's joking around, it's enjoying. And they want more. And if we connect, I think that's the best way we get. Sometimes we go with an agenda before we ever connect with someone.
Yeah.
And when we connect first,
you have to.
And connect with the other humans, it changes the world.
It It does. And there's no doubt the fruit follows, and God has shown up in such a mighty way. And I feel so blessed to, and I think I speak for both of us, we feel so blessed to be just a small part of what God's doing. And just to sit back and go, man, you see how that turned out? I never would have, I don't dream that big. I'm not even close to that. Thank you, Jesus. I mean, a Hope House, goodness,
And I always like to say that, sometimes we're a pebble and we make ripples, and those ripples go out, and then another pebble and those ripples go out, and you both have definitely made ripples in our world. Just by being a small, sometimes we seem insignificant pebble can still make a ripple.
And not to give us any credit, 'cause I think had we not had Christ in our center, there's no doubt we wouldn't be who we are or where we are. It's always been gospel-centered. We've always decided to build our family around that, to build the ministry around Christ, and so He gets all the glory. Because, like I say, I'm just a hillbilly from Bowie, Texas. I could be from here, yeah.
And He can do anything with anybody.
He can do anything.
You're saying there's proof of that.
There is proof of that, yeah.
So how can people connect with you, with Orphanage? How do they best do that? How do they give? How do they donate? How do they help?
I would point them to our website and Facebook page. The organization's Tiny Hearts of Hope.
So the website is tinyheartsofhope.org. And we'll put that on show notes. And
Facebook page, you can do Tiny Hearts of Hope there. We got a little bit of a YouTube presence. There's some videos. I mean, we've been doing this for 10 years, so you can go. Let me rephrase that. We've been doing it longer than 10 years, but we've been putting on Facebook since 2010 or 11. So you can go back to our Facebook page and you can kind of see our history, basically, what we have been doing, working in slums, doing schools, because we put schools in slums. We helped the cafeterias we built, working with the Vietnamese government. So you can kind of see our life, basically, unfold on social media. We have the Shop of Hope also on our Facebook page, and we have a website with that as well. But it's typically more geared towards the Vietnamese because it is a store in Vietnam. But I would definitely point people to the Facebook page, the website. We are speaking at Central Baptist this weekend. We spoke a few weeks ago at First Baptist. Last week was Freedom Life. Probably start doing some more speaking because unfortunately, when you don't get in front of people, your donations kind of fall. So we'll probably come back to do some fundraising. Right now, we're doing our scholarship program. We're trying to send 500 kids to school, which is a big feat, of which to send one kid to school is about $75 US, and that pays full tuition
For the year.
For the year, full tuition, school uniforms, and backpack and school supplies. $75 will
It's like
pay.
a family of 4 or 5 going out to eat once, right?
Yeah, now it might be a couple, 2 people
Yeah.
going out to dinner.
We don't go out.
Isn't that crazy? Well, I mean, some $75. Mind you, again, back to the box illustration when we were doing the food distribution, $75 to a Vietnamese family, they're making about $60, $50 for a family of 4 or 5. They can't afford to send their kids to school. That in itself is a full month's salary or more than. And so $75 will send a kid to school. So when we go back, that's what we're going back for. We'll probably try to go back in January because we'll be hosting that same doctor's team in January. We might take Mark too. Mark Hayes. I'm trying to push him.
Oh, great.
So
And you take volunteers?
We host what we call Hope Teams. If you're interested in teams, we can send you a package, and we would love to host a team from Texas. We've hosted many teams across the U.S., but never a team from Texas.
I was just sharing with a client today that I was going to be speaking with you today, and she got excited. She goes, "How do I go?"
There you go.
So, yes,
There you
so
go.
she was excited. So,
We would love it because
Yes.
I'm going to tell you, no competition here, but we've had a team from Oklahoma. So Texans,
we better
let's
step
go.
up. So what considers a team? How many is a team?
We build it around you, and so you'll send your packet. I'll have you fill it out. There'll be questions like, what do you want to do? Because obviously, if you send a team of 95-year-old men, you don't want to be sitting there doing a lot of like rebuilding an orphanage or something, right? And so we ask those kind of questions. What do you want this to look like? What are you willing to do? And one of the questions is very blunt. Are you willing to share the gospel? Because it is illegal. I mean, you might get in trouble. And so we try to build a team around how the form's filled out. And so we've had small teams. We've had 2. We've had 20 or 30 on those doctors' teams. They get pretty big. And we'll help you get a visa to get in the country. We'll obviously take care of I mean, there's a cost, of course, but we'll help you get your accommodations. And, I mean, it could be anything. It could be, maybe we set you up doing what we call English Club, where you go in and you're teaching English, but that, again, is a great opportunity to share the gospel. Or you're rebuilding an orphanage. We've done orphanage floors where you chip up all the tile. You know, we did a computer lab with the team. Of course, if you're doctors, you know, we can build a team around your skill set, right? And so, but yeah, we would love to have some teams come over.
So there's a lot of opportunities through financial donations,
Of course.
through time donation.
Prayer, always,
prayer.
I think prayer, in Vietnam, it's such a pivotal time, and the government is we're probably getting away with a lot more. It seems like Vietnam of 2008, when we moved over to today, it seems like we're getting away with a lot more, and the gospel is still exploding. And so I would still say pray for the government officials, pray for the gospel to continue to spread, because it is changing lives. We're seeing it, and we get to be a small part of seeing not just amazing things happen, we get to see individuals' lives change. We have people that are our staff, and even in our Hope House, we're seeing these kids grow up in the Lord. There's nothing like it. So pray for those individuals, pray for the country, and those that are authorities. So
There's a lot of ways that we can help. Even though we're not there, we can help.
Yes.
So, well, thank you very much, Brent and Stacy, for joining me today and sharing your story, sharing your faith, just sharing your mission work that is changing the world. And I think sometimes it changes in us first,
yeah.
so we can go out and help others. And it's interesting, you didn't change everybody at once. It's one person at a time.
It has to be.
It's one person, one connection, one conversation at a time. So
Thank you for having us.
you're
It's
welcome.
been great.
Thank you. I was excited about sharing your mission with me, sharing your orphanage and your story, because we all have a story, and sometimes we don't take time to hear those stories.
Come out, come with us.
And you come to Vietnam, you can join.
You
You can
can,
see
I
it.
can get you on the back of my motorbike, and I can take you through Saigon.
I might be scared, so I might bear.
Oh, there's no doubt. Every time
Yeah.
we have our teams come over, everybody wants to ride on the moped, and we always joke that she'll take the girls and I'll take the boys, and you can just feel the
We call them white knuckles.
white knuckles. They'll be, yeah, because it is intimidating.
If I can do it, you can do it.
Again, YouTube, Saigon Track, Coach Vincent.
I'm going to do that because I want to see
Yeah.
what that's like.
And I believe there's probably, even on our page, I think there's a video of us driving. We were driving, recording. This would have been
Yeah.
2000 and maybe 10 or 11 at the time. And so you can see that as well. You can see us driving through all that
Right.
madness.
Well, thank you. I appreciate you taking the time, and wish you well, and pray for you in the coming trip to Vietnam in just a couple weeks. Less than a couple weeks, about a week and a half. And just thank you so much for making a difference.
I appreciate
Join me
it.
today. So, and thank you for each of you for stopping by and joining me on the Mind Body Project. And it's time my wife came every night before I go to bed. It's bottom of the night. Double A out. Look around.
Did we do okay as Corey?
You know, you did great.
I'm sitting there thinking, crap, I gotta go pee again. I shouldn't have had that big coffee. I'm sitting there thinking, I wonder if I can hold.
You did great.